The U.S. Navy spent decades developing a system designed to eliminate steam catapults from its aircraft carriers. It cost billions. It helped define an entirely new class of nuclear-powered supercarriers. And after years of technical problems, the system is finally operating at sea. Now, the United States has been ordered to figure out how to put the steam back. On August 13, 2026, President Donald Trump signed a national security memorandum directing the Pentagon to produce, within 60 days, a plan to replace the electromagnetic aircraft launch system, EMALS, with traditional steam catapults on the future USS Doris Miller. CVN 81. The order also calls for replacing its electromagnetic weapons elevators with hydraulic systems. And that raises a fascinating question. Is the U.S. Navy correcting one of the most expensive technological mistakes in modern naval history, or abandoning a system just as it is finally beginning to work? To understand the argument, you first have to understand what happens when an aircraft takes off from a carrier. A fully loaded fighter cannot simply accelerate down a carrier deck and fly away. The runway is too short. For decades, American carriers solved that problem with steam. On a Nimitz-class carrier, high-pressure steam drives pistons beneath the flight deck, connected to a shuttle attached to the aircraft. In just seconds, an F-A-18, F-35C, or E-2 Hawkeye is accelerated to flying speed. Steam catapults are powerful, proven and backed by decades of operational experience. But they are also complex. They require extensive piping, mechanical components, constant maintenance, and large amounts of steam. Their acceleration is also harder to control precisely. That is why the Ford class was designed differently. Instead of steam, EMALS uses electromagnetic fields to accelerate the launch shuttle down the catapult track. In simple terms, it works like a giant linear electric motor built into the flight deck. Navarre says, EMALS offers smoother acceleration, more precise end-speed control, reduced stress on aircraft, and the ability to launch a much wider range of aircraft weights, including future unmanned systems. And that could become increasingly important. The carrier air wing of the future may include fighters, tankers, surveillance aircraft, and combat drones with very different launch requirements. An electromagnetic system can tailor the launch force to each aircraft. At least, that was the promise. Because EMALS had a very difficult beginning. During development of USS Gerald R. Ford, the Navy introduced several major technologies at once. EMALS was one of them. The advanced arresting gear and electromagnetic weapons elevators were others. Costs increased sharply. A Government Accountability Office review found that the procurement cost attributed to EMALS rose from around $318 million in an early Navy estimate to nearly $670 million by 2017. Reliability became an even bigger issue. Failures during testing repeatedly interrupted flight operations, and the system initially performed far below Navy reliability goals. Some problems remain today. The Pentagon's Director of Operational Test and Evaluation reported in 2025 that EMALS and the advanced arresting gear were still affecting flight operations and sortie generation aboard. Gerald R. Ford. So the criticism is not imaginary. On an aircraft carrier, reliability is everything. If the catapult cannot launch aircraft, a 100,000-ton warship loses much of its combat value. But there is another side to the story. EMALS is no longer just an experimental system in a shipyard. USS Gerald R. Ford returned in May 2026 from a 326-day deployment. During that deployment, its air wing logged more than 5,700 flight hours and more than 12,000 launches. Whatever its remaining problems, EMALS has now demonstrated sustained real-world operations. And that brings us to USS Doris Miller. Changing the catapult on a carrier is not like replacing one weapon with another. The Ford class was designed around electrical power. The Navy deliberately eliminated many of the steam service systems used on older carriers and built the ship around EMALS from the beginning. Installing steam catapults could therefore require major redesign. The ship would need steam piping, accumulators, pistons, and supporting machinery that were never part of the original design. Internal layouts, power plant integration, and flight deck systems could all be affected, and construction is already underway. General Atomics, which manufactures EMALS, says production of the system intended for CVN-81 is already nearly 50% complete. The company warns that changing course now could create major cost, schedule, and integration risks. General Atomics clearly has a commercial interest here, but the engineering challenge is still real. And there is another awkward part of the story. While the United States debates going back to steam, other navies are moving toward electromagnetic launch systems. China commissioned the Fujian. In November 2025, its first aircraft carrier equipped with electromagnetic catapults. The system has already been used to launch aircraft including the J-15T, J-35 stealth fighter, and KJ-600 airborne early warning aircraft. France is also developing its next-generation nuclear carrier around electromagnetic launch technology. That does not automatically prove EMALS is better. China's system is new, and the United States still has vastly more carrier operating experience. But the contrast is difficult to ignore. China and France are moving toward electromagnetic launch systems, while Washington considers whether its newest carrier should return to steam. So which side is right? The real debate is not old technology versus new technology. Steam has one enormous advantage: maturity. The U.S. Navy knows exactly how it behaves after decades at sea. EMALS offers precision, flexibility, and potential advantages for future unmanned aircraft. But it also failed to meet some of the reliability expectations that justified its development. The real question is whether switching back now would reduce risk, or simply replace one kind of risk with another. USS Doris Miller could serve for around half a century. The catapult chosen today may eventually launch aircraft that have not even been designed yet. So the United States is not simply deciding how to launch an F-35 tomorrow. It is deciding how an American carrier will launch aircraft in the 2040s, 2050s, and beyond. For years, the question was whether EMALS could become reliable enough to replace steam. Now the question is different. After spending decades making electromagnetic catapults work, does it really make sense to go back? Subscribe to WarTech Breakdown for more deep dives into the technology, weapons, and strategic decisions shaping the future of warfare.